He knows that on Shabbos, the minhag in the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Kuf Samach Zayin, he writes, is to dip your bread in salt. You don't just eat your bread. You say hamaitzi, you dip the bread, and then you eat the holy hamaitzi. Now I know from Rosh Hashanah until Hoshana Rabbah, the minhag is to dip the apple in the honey. But now, this Shabbos, we go back to the ancient minhag of dipping the bread in the salt.
Some people sprinkle. It's better to dip.
Now, there are different minhagim as to how exactly we dip the salt. Some people sprinkle the salt on the bread, and some people take the bread and dip it into the salt. And in fact, according to the Kabbalah, the Indian is to take the bread and dip it 3 times. 3 times in the salt. 1, 2, 3, and then you eat the hamaitzi. Now, everything we do has deep reasoning. What is the reasoning for 3 times? The gematria of Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, is 26. 26 times 3 dips, is 78. 78 is the gematria of melach, salt.
Oh, wow.
So there's deep ideas going in to why we dip the bread into the salt. Now, there's also, it's important, the Holy Shlah, Rav Yishai Haretz writes, that you should leave the salt on the table. Even if there's no space, you make space for salt until benching. Okay? Now, one more minhag. There was a minhag to put a lot of salt in your food. The Holy Rishner would put a lot of salt in his soup. And a lot of Sfardim and myself are makbid about this. Put a lot of salt in your schug. Put a lot of salt in all of your food items as a minhag of on Shabbos Kodesh. There's one more minhag. The woman should bring the salt to the table. Why? Because the woman, Eshes Lot, she turned into salt. So now we fix that by her bringing salt to the table.
If you don't like salt.
If you don't like salt, you're in big trouble. You're probably not Jewish. No, it's okay. But there's a reason behind everything. So the truth of the truth is they put salt in bread nowadays. So technically, halachically, if you don't like salt that much, there's already salt in the bread. So you're not violating the halacha, even if you didn't dip the salt in the bread. But on a Kabbalistic, Hasidic level, there's deep ideas that we're going to go into right now as to why we dafka want to dip into salt. So let's give 3 explanations, yeah? Explanation number 1, this is brought down by Tiferes Shlomo. It's a great Hasidic sefer that I like to learn. Rav Shlomo Miradomsk. He writes that there are 4 different elements of the universe. There's, let's go through it. Domem, something that's not alive at all. Tzomeach, something that comes from vegetation. Chai, an animal, and medaber. That's us. We speak. These are the 4 different levels, and we want to raise everything up on Shabbos Kodesh. So we take the salt, which is doimem. We take the tzomeach, which is any vegetation, like bread or salad. We take the chai, which is animals, and we take the medaber, which is us, and we put them all together and use them all for holiness to connect to Kadosh Baruch Hu. And that's one reason on the level of Sod, we're lifting up all of creation at our Holy Shabbos table. At a similar level, Rabbeinu Bachaya writes that the ocean was jealous. Everything is being uplifted. It said, look, in the Midbar, it got uplifted when we got the Torah in the Midbar. The Yishuv got uplifted when you had the Beis Hamikdash in the settlements. And the ocean said, what about me? So we take the salt from the ocean and we use it at our Shabbos table, and the ocean is consoled. That's the explanation of Rabbeinu Bachaya, but it's the same idea that the salt we're lifting it up at our Shabbos table. Explanation number 2 is brought by the Heilige Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov says that we know that there's a Melech Bris. How do we know that we have a Melech Bris? Because we have it in the Torah in Perik Yud Gimel of Vayikra. Bris Melech, a Bris Melech. That's Bris baby. We have a bris with salt, the covenant, and thus, says the Baal Shem Tov, since we have a bris with melech, there's kitrugim, there's prosecutors that are speaking badly about us after we eat the bread. And the melech gets rid of the kitrugim. Since we have a covenant with Hashem with the bris, with salt, it somehow defends us. So that's a little bit of a mystical, spiritual idea. Somehow it gets rid of the piranhas by having salt at our Shabbos table.
What does that mean?
We have a covenant with, just as melach is a preservative, so the Torah says we have an unbreakable bond with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Just as salt would preserve things, we have before they had refrigerators, so you want to keep something for a long time, you put salt in it. So too our relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu is everlasting, and therefore it somehow is a protection against the piranhas. That's what the Baal Shem Tov brings down. The Heilige of Baal Shem Tov. Third explanation. The Shulchan is doimil mizbeach. We learned this in the Gemara in Brachas Daf Nun Hey, that we don't have a mizbeach, but we have a Shulchan nowadays. That's why everything we do at our table, especially at the Shabbos table, parallels that which was done in the Beis HaMikdash. And just like they had salt at their table, so we have salt at our table. Right? The whole difference here to show how everything that we do at our holy table parallels what was done in the Beis HaMikdash.
You added salt to a korban?
We had salt. That's right. We always had salt on the mizbeach. Al kol korbanecha takuv melach v'yikra beis yud gimel. So therefore, to remind us of the holy avodah of eating, we put salt on our table to show us again the holy avodah of eating with kedusha. It's related to the first explanation, and maybe last explanation. Al derech drush, melach represents gevura. Okay, because if you have a lot of melach, you take a whole bag of melach and you eat it, you're in trouble. Melech destroyed the world by stone. Melech can destroy crops. Too much gvura, which is represented by melech, is a bad thing. But if you only have chesed with no gvura, it's also a bad thing. Life is about balance. If you have the proper amount of gvura, it brings out the chesed. It makes it much sweeter. In other words, let's say a person all love, but he has no borders. He's not able to say, okay, but I only love my wife. I'm not going to just give every woman in the world a hug, for example. So that's not real chesed. That's chesed without borders is not real chesed. So the melach represents gvura, which brings out the chesed. There's a time and a place for everything, and chesed also brings out the gvura. Okay? There's a time for gvura, there's a time for chesed. When everything is done in its proper proportion, it makes everything more beautiful. And that is what we're reminding ourselves al derech drush when we have melach at our Shabbos table. Even though we're having so much fun at the Shabbos table, we're singing and we're dancing, we have to be within the confines of halacha. We have to, eat and drink within reason and have holy fun, but it has to be done in a holy context. So that's al derech drush, another explanation for why we have salt at our holy Shabbos table. And so again, there's another amazing example based on this sefer, Rav Yosef Kar's Six HaShabbos B'Chasidus, of the depth of every explanation and Shabbos Kiddush. Everything we do has deep reasoning. Yashar Koach.